Is there any other non-obvious or unpopular belief that you hold?
Oh man, that's a good one. I think one of the, and this comes from a friend of mine, so I don't know how unpopular it is, but is that, we live in a world where we teach people to make decisions that are purely rational. And I don't believe that all decisions should be purely rational. I think you need to understand sort of where you are on a continuum between emotional and rational, and whether that's serving you in the moment. Like, you probably don't want to be making emotional decisions about financial transactions, but you also probably don't want to be super rational about relationship decisions. And I think both of those things can serve you, right? You don't want to be a super rational parent. You want to empathize with your kids and be emotional and understanding with them. And I think you just need to realize where you are on that spectrum. And I know, like, most of what's taught in decision making is just you need to be more rational, and that's the way to get what you want. And again, it comes down to, like, are you climbing the right mountain? And if you get to the top of that, is that the place that you want to be?
Yeah, so I know in a lot of your work you do talk about mental models and making better decisions. How do you actually think about that in making your decisions? Like, when do you know when it's more beneficial for you to be using more of that data-driven brain, and when do you kind of let it go and see it more to your intuition or your gut? Is there a way that you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different frameworks for that. One is like type 1 or type 2 decisions, type 1 being irreversible, high consequence decisions, type 2 being sort of like everything else. If you think of a 4x4 matrix and having reversible and irreversible and consequential and inconsequential, you want the most data and you want to be the most sure and have the most structure around sort of the type 1 decisions. But type 2, if you're making them, you sort of like want to make them quickly and more intuitively, but follow up to hone your judgment and calibrate how good your judgment is, or delegate if you're leading a team of people to build up high judgment, high performing team. And I think that that's a good way to like conceptualize those type of decisions. And I think ultimately, I never try to predict the future, or I rarely try to predict the future. I think that that's just I don't understand that. The people that can predict the future, man, you're amazing, but I am not one of you. And I wish I was. So what I'm trying to do is just position for multiple possible futures. And often, it just sort of like turns out good, because who knows, like, think of a company that sort of like optimized their balance sheet in December of last year, right? Like the airline stocks, right? They bought back tens of billions of dollars worth of their shares last year. And they were optimizing and they were predicting the future. They were predicting that the future would look exactly like the past and that things would continue going as the status quo. So they're predicting that. And that makes sense given, going back again to timelines, the average CEO tenure is sort of 3 to 5 years. They're making that prediction because they want to get paid in those 3 to 5 years. But if you take that time horizon to 100 years, all of a sudden that prediction looks a lot less safe. And what you're thinking about is like, how do I preserve optionality? How do I prepare? And like, you don't know a pandemic's coming, but you're thinking in your head, like, how do I just prepare for the widest possible ranges of future that are possible? And I think that often, you stumble into good decisions. And if you look like what Buffett's doing today, I think that's basically what he's doing. He's like, the future is harder to predict than it was 12 months ago. I'm going to save cash because that's going to give me the most options. And he might end up looking like an idiot. And that's okay, because like, you're never going to do anything great unless you're willing to look like an idiot in the short term. But if we end up in a future where he can deploy that cash, he's going to look like a genius. And if nothing happens, he survived, right? Like, either way, the outcome is he's preparing for 100 years. And that looks vastly different than CEOs that are optimizing for like the next, 5 years, which are like, oh, we have cash on our balance sheet, let's buy back shares, because then we'll drive up the shareholder return. And that's what matters. Well, 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 0 is 0. And, I think the airlines are in for a bit of a wake up call, but that type of thinking is what gets you in trouble.